The music had stopped, the guests were gone, and what was supposed to be the happiest night of her life felt unbearably quiet. Tamika Reynolds, still in her wedding dress, the hem darkened from the Atlanta pavement, clutched her bouquet like it was holding her together. 31 years old, a nurse, a woman who had waited her whole life for this kind of love. She thought she had found it in Malcolm Carter, a man who said he'd changed, said he left his past behind. But when she realized he had disappeared from the reception without saying a word, something inside her told her not to wait. So she went looking. Down the corridor of the venue, past the kitchen staff, through the double doors and out into the parking garage, and there, half in the shadows, pressed against a concrete pillar, was her husband, his arms wrapped around another woman, kissing her like the vows he just made meant nothing. And that woman was Tamika's younger sister. Her body froze, her mind raced, a lifetime of trust shattered in seconds. No screams, no words, just silence. And then, rage, the kind of rage that doesn't just break hearts, it spills blood. What happened next would change everything. Police, headlines, a family torn apart. Before we go deeper into this jaw-dropping case, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Tamika Reynolds was the kind of woman people described as soft-spoken but strong. 31 years old, a registered nurse with long hours and a quiet grace about her. Family was everything to Tamika. Her parents had raised her in the church, and even as an adult, she rarely missed a Sunday. She didn't post much online, didn't party, didn't chase trends. She wanted what most women want: love, stability, someone to build a future with. Malcolm Carter was that someone, or so she thought. He was tall, charming, with a voice that could sell anything. 35, an Atlanta entrepreneur with a smile that lit up any room. He owned 2 barbershops, spoke at local schools, and wore his redemption like a badge of honor. Malcolm never hid that he'd been in trouble when he was younger: drugs, theft, even a short stint in jail, but he claimed all that was behind him. A changed man, God-fearing, focused. They met 2 years ago at a community fundraiser hosted by Tamika's church. She was working the health booth, checking blood pressure. He was one of the guest speakers. One conversation turned into a dinner, then a weekend trip. Then he was meeting her parents, proposing within a year. Their wedding, held on a warm July evening in Atlanta, looked like something pulled from a movie set. White roses, crystal chandeliers, over 200 guests, a live band. Her dress was handmade, flown in from New York. Everything was perfect, or at least, that's what everyone said. But beneath the fairy lights and Instagram-perfect smiles, someone was hiding a life they swore had ended. Friends had tried to warn her. One even pulled her aside 2 weeks before the wedding and asked, "Are you sure you know everything about Malcolm?" An ex-girlfriend sent her a message the night before the ceremony. It sat unread in her inbox. Tamika believed in second chances. She believed in love. But love alone doesn't always protect you. And sometimes, love blinds you to the truth standing right in front of you. The wedding ended with cheers, smiles, cameras flashing as they drove off in a white rental car with "Just Married" written across the back window in thick gold paint. Tamika thought they were headed straight to the airport for their flight to the Bahamas, the start of their honeymoon. She had packed their bags weeks in advance, triple-checked the itinerary, even printed out Malcolm's boarding pass herself. But an hour after the reception, as they pulled into the driveway of their new apartment, Malcolm turned off the engine and sat there silently. Then he turned to her and said, "I have to go handle something, real quick. It won't take long." No explanation, no apology. Just a quick kiss on her cheek and a promise to be back in a few hours. Tamika waited. She called once. No answer. By the 3rd hour, she wasn't angry. She was confused, hurt, sitting in her wedding dress on the edge of their bed, staring at her phone. That's when she saw it. A missed call. from an unsaved number, followed by a text message. "Congrats, I guess." Tamika remembered that number. It had buzzed during the ceremony, right in the middle of their vows. She'd seen Malcolm glance at it, then quickly silence his phone. She thought nothing of it at the time, but now she couldn't ignore it. She clicked the number. No name, no photo. Just a call history filled with late-night conversations going back months. Her heart pounding, she grabbed her keys. She didn't text him. She didn't call again. She followed him. He wasn't hard to find. His location had synced with hers months ago, something he insisted on for safety. He had driven 20 minutes outside Atlanta, past the well-lit streets, into an older neighborhood lined with silence and sagging porches. He parked in front of a 2-story house with chipped paint and no porch light. He didn't knock. He walked right in, like he'd been there before, like he belonged. Tamika stayed in her car, engine off, her fingers gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned pale. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 3. The front door never opened again. She thought about going home, thought about pretending she never saw any of this. But something inside her wouldn't let her leave, because deep down, she knew. She knew that the man she married was hiding something. What Tamika found inside that house would shatter her image of Malcolm forever. Tamika sat in her car for what felt like a lifetime, her mind racing, her body frozen. Every second Malcolm stayed inside that house made her stomach turn. She needed answers. She needed truth. Even if it broke her, she got out, quietly, carefully, still in the same wedding dress she had danced in just hours earlier. The fabric now wrinkled, heavy, dragging against her ankles. She crept through the side yard, heart pounding in her ears, past an old grill and a broken garden hose, and reached the back of the house. The door wasn't locked. It creaked slightly as she pushed it open. The first thing she heard was moaning. Low, rhythmic, undeniable. Her throat went dry. Her body moved on its own, one step at a time down a short hallway, until she reached the edge of the living room. That's when she saw them, Malcolm, naked, straddling someone on the couch, his face buried in the neck of a woman whose voice she'd heard 1,000 times before. It was Tanya, her cousin. Tamika gasped. Malcolm didn't hear it, but Tanya did. Their eyes locked, and in that single, horrific second, everything Tamika thought she knew about her life collapsed. Because Tanya wasn't just any cousin, she was more like a sister. After Tanya's mother passed when they were teenagers, Tamika's parents took her in. They shared a bedroom, clothes, secrets. Tamika defended Tanya from bullies at school, cried with her at their mother's funeral. They were family in every way that mattered. Or so she thought. But what Tamika didn't know, what no one had told her, was that Malcolm and Tanya had a history, a messy one. They had dated briefly years ago. The story Tanya gave was that it ended badly, that he used her, lied to her, left her heartbroken. Tamika believed her, comforted her, never imagined that months later she would meet Malcolm herself, and fall for him too. When she first told Tanya about him, Tanya pretended to be shocked. "Small world," she said with a nervous laugh. "I didn't know he was still around." Tamika believed that too. Now, standing in the shadows of that unfamiliar house, she saw the truth. Their relationship never ended. It had just gone underground. Tamika raised her phone, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. She snapped pictures, not out of revenge, not even for proof, but because she needed to remind herself that this wasn't a dream, that she wasn't losing her mind. Then she ran, out the back door, down the street, into her car. She didn't scream. She sobbed, a sound so deep and broken it hurt to breathe. The wedding was over, but the nightmare had just begun. For 2 full days, no one heard from Tamika, not her parents, not her friends, not even her job, where she never missed a shift. Her phone went dark. Her apartment sat quiet. The white suitcase she packed for her honeymoon still rested by the front door, untouched. Meanwhile, Malcolm began unraveling. He returned home alone, telling Tamika's family she needed space, that something came up with her job and they postponed the trip. But his hands shook when he spoke. He started screening calls, locking his phone, canceling plans. The man who was once the center of every room suddenly started watching every corner. And then there was Tanya. She posted a photo on Facebook. Black screen, no caption, just the words, "Some secrets never die." Comments flooded in, some asking if she was okay, others tagging Malcolm. Nobody had answers. But Tamika's best friend, Rochelle, knew something was wrong. She received a string of voice messages early that morning. Tamika's voice was hoarse, low, but unmistakably clear. "I'm not gonna let them win. He ruined my life. They both did. You give people your heart, and they turn around and stab you with it. That ends now." The messages stopped after that, but they were enough to send Rochelle into panic mode. She tried to call, no answer. She drove by Tamika's place, still dark, still locked. What no one knew was that Tamika was watching. She wasn't hiding. She was preparing. 2 towns over, she walked into a licensed firearms store with her driver's license and a clean record. 30 minutes later, she left with a registered handgun and a box of ammunition. Later that night, she drove back to Atlanta, parked a few streets away from Malcolm's apartment, sat there, waiting, watching, learning his patterns, when he left, where he went, who he was with. But Tamika wasn't just planning violence. She was looking for clarity. She visited her childhood pastor the next morning, sat in the front pew alone, face buried in her hands. She stayed for nearly an hour, just sitting, silent, still. But that same evening, she contacted someone from her past, an ex, a man named Deshaun, someone she hadn't spoken to in nearly 7 years. He'd served time, wasn't someone she was proud to have loved. But right now, she wasn't looking for love. She was looking for options. And Deshaun knew how to handle complicated problems. The quiet, sweet girl who once believed in second chances was gone. What was left behind was a woman with nothing to lose. It was July 8th, a warm Saturday night in Atlanta, the kind where the air feels thick and the city refuses to sleep. At exactly 11:24 p.m., Malcolm Carter checked into a short-term Airbnb on the east side of town, a 2-bedroom rental with white blinds, beige walls, and a bottle of champagne chilling in the fridge. Tanya arrived 15 minutes later. They weren't hiding anymore. In their minds, the dust had settled. The storm had passed. They believed Tamika was gone for good, that maybe they could start over. They were celebrating what Malcolm called new beginnings, but the past wasn't finished with them. At 12:02 a.m., the front door creaked open. Tamika Reynolds walked in calmly. She wasn't wearing a disguise. She wasn't carrying a weapon in plain sight. Her voice was steady, her eyes sharp. She looked at the man she married, then turned her gaze to Tanya and said, "So this is what I do means to you?" Malcolm stood up, startled. Tanya backed away, her face draining of color. There was a long, heavy silence, then yelling, accusations, tears. Tamika moved closer. The shouting escalated. Tanya screamed, "You're crazy!" and bolted toward the door. That's when the first shot rang out, then another. Neighbors would later say they heard a woman screaming, then nothing. By the time police arrived, Malcolm lay motionless on the floor, a gunshot wound to the chest. Tanya was bleeding from her leg, crying, covered in blood, curled in the corner. The 911 call came in at 12:14 a.m. Through the static, Tanya's voice could be heard, screaming, "She shot us! I think Malcolm's dead! Please, send someone, please!" Tamika didn't run. She didn't hide. At 6:40 the next morning, she walked into a local police station, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. She handed over her purse, said her name clearly, and whispered, "I'm the one you're looking for." The trial began less than 6 months after the shooting. Cameras packed the courtroom. Reporters lined the courthouse steps. The headlines didn't hold back. Bride behind bars. Murder in white lace. Shot on the honeymoon night. And there was the photo, Tamika's mugshot, taken just hours after the killing. Her face streaked with tears, her veil still pinned to her hair, the same dress she wore down the aisle, now stained with blood. It went viral. Overnight, she became a symbol of heartbreak, of rage, of something broken and misunderstood. The defense claimed Tamika had snapped. Temporary insanity caused by extreme emotional trauma. Betrayed by two people she trusted most. Blindsided in the worst way, but the prosecution painted a different picture. They called it premeditated, pointed to the legally purchased gun, the long hours she spent watching Malcolm's movements, the voice notes to her best friend. They said this wasn't heartbreak, it was revenge. The courtroom fell silent when Tanya took the stand. She cried the moment she sat down. Her voice cracked as she looked at Tamika, then at the jury. "I never meant to hurt her," she whispered. I loved him too." Then came the twist. Financial records showed that Malcolm had been secretly paying Tanya's rent for nearly 8 months, long before the wedding. Tamika hadn't just walked in on a betrayal. She had been living inside one, for nearly a year. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On the 4th, they returned with a verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Tamika was sentenced to 20 years in state prison. She didn't cry when the verdict was read. She didn't look back as they placed the cuffs on her wrists. Outside the courthouse, the public was torn. Some called her a cold-blooded killer. Others saw a woman broken by betrayal, a woman who gave her heart and lost everything. In a quiet interview, filmed months after the verdict, Tamika's mother sat on her porch, her eyes full of grief, her voice barely above a whisper. "She just wanted love," she said, "not blood." There was no anger in her words, only sorrow, the kind that comes from watching your child fall apart in slow motion, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to save. A wedding photo surfaced again online, the one where Malcolm and Tamika were kissing at the altar. Her eyes closed, his hand on her waist. The crowd clapping, the image freezes, a moment suspended in time. Two people, locked in what looked like forever, but who knew that moment would lead to murder, love, trust, betrayal. How far would you go if everything you believed in turned out to be a lie? Was Tamika a cold-blooded killer or just a woman who broke under betrayal? What would you have done? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your thoughts. This case reminds us, some vows are made in truth, others in deception, and sometimes love can be deadly. One moment, you're walking down the aisle. The next, you're walking into a courtroom, and the distance between those two moments is often just one secret too many. If this story gripped you, hit that like button. It helps others discover these untold true crimes. Subscribe for more real stories every single week. And as always, stay safe and stay watching.